Welcome, everyone. We will get started momentarily. Thank you for being here. Glad to see everyone coming into the breakout session. Welcome. We'll give it another 30 seconds to a minute to make sure that everyone is able to access the breakout. We hope you enjoyed Judy Heumann, her keynote, pretty amazing. Would love to see some comments. What are your thoughts about the start of the conference? Hit the ground running this morning. She was incredible. And Kristen, you did a great job facilitating. All right. Vince, are you ready to get started?
Ready to go.
All right. Welcome, everyone, and hello. Welcome to Rethinking How You Create a Culture of Inclusion, moving from impossible to possible, presented by Vince Martinez, Senior Partner with Culture Partners. I'm Kevin Schaefer, Director of Inclusive Practices for the SIP Project, your moderator for this incredibly informative breakout session. First, a few logistics. This webinar will be recorded and archived on the conference agenda after the conference for 1 month. Closed captioning is available by clicking on the CC button on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. The interpretation icon in the same area will provide access to Spanish translation. We will ensure that ASL interpreters are spotlighted along with the PowerPoint and the presenter. Please feel free to interact using the chat and ask specific questions in the Q&A option. And with that, Vince, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. And good morning, good afternoon. I don't know if we have anybody in the evening time frame, but it is great to be with you all. As Kevin had mentioned, my name is Vince Martinez, Senior Consulting Partner with an organization called Culture Partners. Our organization, Culture Partners, has worked for the last 35 years in helping to create cultures that deliver the desired results that people are looking to achieve, whether that's something in the for-profit space or the nonprofit space, whatever the desired results are. Along the way, we have learned a lot about this idea of how do we take what is perhaps perceived as impossible and turning it into possible. We've worked with thousands of organizations across the globe and how to transition their culture or their mindsets so that people show up thinking and ultimately acting in the way you need them to act. So today, as we get started, I want to start with 3 very simple numbers for you. These numbers have something in common, and if you would, just in the chat panel for me, would be great. Kind of take your best guess at what these numbers have in common. 1903, 10, and 2. I'll wait to see here what you come up with. It's always fun to see where people come up with their responses here. 1903, 10, and 2. These 3 numbers begin to tell a really interesting story here. So what do you think these 3 numbers have in common? Just in the chat panel, if you would. Group, take wild guesses for me. Years reference. Okay, Deborah, you're on the right path a little bit. That first number is definitely a year reference. Okay. Any other thoughts on what this may have in common, group, as you find that chat functionality? All right, not to keep you, legislation, Department of Special Ed. Okay. Reminds me of the old Dr. Pepper commercials. Yeah, some great ones here, team. So these 3 numbers tell a really, really fascinating story. And I love these 10 states in 1903. They're all numbers, Windows 10 version. Yeah. So 1903 was the year that the New York Times, in an article in the New York Times, suggested that in order to have a flying machine, it would take between 1 and 10 million years before there would be a flying machine available to us as humans. So in 1903, New York Times suggests that it could take up to 10 million years before we have a flying machine. Now, the interesting irony on this was literally 2 months and 8 days later, the Wright brothers took their first flight. So when we talk about this idea of the impossible becoming the possible, it starts to bridge a really interesting conversation for us. And yes, they were absolutely off base, Katrina. And by the way, we can think of times throughout history where we thought that things were perhaps never going to be possible. It does lead us naturally into a very, very simple question, which is this. Just in the chat panel or raise your hand and we can take you off of mute if you have some thoughts on this. We're spending our time today talking about this idea of inclusion and how do we move from impossible to possible in creating this culture of inclusion. So what are some of the biggest obstacles to inclusion? And I'm seeing here as these are going by, I'm loving this mindset, especially that of the gen ed teachers, right? Buy-in, great, lots of stuck mindsets. Tons of great comments here. Open hearts, willingness or buy-in. Yeah, large districts, misperceptions, preconceived notions. So good. Teacher buy-in. Adults not seeing the benefit. Mary Jude says that deficit thinking.
Vince, we have Ariane who raised her hand.
Oh, Ariane, please, we'll get you unmuted here. We'd love to hear your thoughts here.
She's ready to go.
I had mentioned in the chat that, my son is in LAUSD, which is one of the largest school districts in Southern California. And, the problem is they're trying to implement inclusion policies that benefit a large group of schools that have a lot of individual situations. And, they're slowly getting to that inclusion mindset, but it's taking a long time.
Yeah, so Ariane, oftentimes it's perhaps a one size fits all approach that is being applied where individualized needs are having to be met, right? So there's some huge challenges with that. My student, your student mentality. I love the comment there, Ariane, because you'll see John here reflects in the chat panel. It could oftentimes even be perceived as an us versus them. This site within LAUSD versus this additional site. And why would one get more resources than others, or people be treated differently? You can think of all of the things that could potentially play out here. And what I love about having such a broad group here is we've got a chat panel rich in responses. So I want to illustrate this a little further and begin to push our own mindset on this idea of possible to impossible here. And to do this, I really need 2 volunteers. And I promise you this is going to be really, really simple and straightforward. It will not be something difficult. Just if there are 2 of you who would be willing to volunteer, just raise your hands. As we're seeing those, Kevin, a couple of people raising their hands. I think it's Mika and Roger, maybe. Does that sound right?
Sure.
They're unmuted.
Yeah,
perfect.
Sounds right. Mika's correct. Very good.
Mika. Okay, so Mika and Roger, first of all, thank you for volunteering. We're going to have you unmuted for a minute here just to illustrate this concept or this mindset idea a little bit for the group. Okay, now we're going to play a game, Mika and Roger. So what's the object of any game?
To win.
Fun.
All right, perfect. And I do want to make sure, Mika, we got your name pronounced right. I see Rogers here, so I may have gotten the first name. Sharita. Okay, thank you. So Sharita and Mika. Sorry about that, Sharita. So Sharita and Mika, what I love about this, one of you said to have fun, and Sharita, you said to win, right? Well, the object of this game, Sharita, I'm going with you on this one. The object of this game is to win. And the way you're going to win in this game is you're going to have to score some points. All right. So fair enough, Sharita and Mika? We tracking so far? All right. So, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to throw up on the screen just a simple a grid, a hashtag up here. Okay. So Sharita and Mika, I need you to choose between you. I need you to choose a partner X and a partner O. Who would like to be X and who would like to be O?
I'll be O. Sharita's O.
Sharita is O. Mika, by default, that means you are X. All right.
Sounds good.
So with this, I want to make sure you understand the rules of the game here. If you get 2 of any item in a row, you will get 2 points. If you get 3 of any item in a row, you will get 5 points. Doesn't matter, up, down, straight, diagonal. 2 in a row is 2 points. 3 in a row is 5 points. Sharita and Mika, we tracking so far?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Now I need you to understand there's one rule and one rule only in this game. This is not tic-tac-toe. Okay.
Gotcha.
This is not tic-tac-toe. All right. So Mika, we'll let you go first since Sharita chose the O. Where would you like to go, Mika?
In the center.
In the center. Okay. So, and you were X. So I'm going to throw you up here. Perfect. Sharita, how about you?
Top left.
Top left. Very good. All right, Mika.
Middle left.
Middle left. Okay. And you were X. Very good. All right, Sharita.
Top middle.
Top middle. Oh, this is getting interesting. All right, Mika.
I'm gonna collaborate here. How about middle right?
Middle right. All right. So here we go. Okay, like that. Sharita.
It's not a trick.
But no. Bottom left.
Bottom left.
No, bottom right. Sorry, bottom right.
Bottom right. Interesting. Okay. All right, Mika, we're up to you.
Okay. Bottom middle.
Bottom middle. Ooh. All right.
Top right.
Top right. Okay. Mika.
The one left.
Oh, perfect. I was going to guess, but I didn't want to overstep my bounds here. All right. So using my point system here, we're going to try to add these up. We'll start, Mika, with you. I've got 2 points here. I've got another 5 points here. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We could go 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 18, 19. I think I got them all. Does that look about right, Mika, to you?
From middle to left will be the 21. 20.
Middle to left. Oh, you're right. Right here. Correct. All right. So 21. Thanks for keeping me honest, Mika. All right. Sharita, let's try for you. I've got 5 here, 6, 7, 8, 9. Does that seem right?
Yeah.
All right. So very, very good. So team, just in the chat panel or something, let's give Mika and Sharita a thumbs up, a courtesy applause emoji. Great job, something. Very, very well done, Mika and Sharita. We're going to keep you off mute for just a second because I want to start to break this down to get us to this idea of inclusion a little bit. So what was the object of the game? Sharita, we said it was to
Win.
All right. So, and to win in this game, you had to score as many points as you can. Now, here's where this gets really interesting, and it starts to tie us back to this idea of inclusion, team. When we talk about the biggest barriers to inclusion, you saw it in the chat panel. There was this idea of mindset. Well, this game beautifully illustrates exactly the challenge we have when it comes to mindset. And it is this. I gave you both the same rules, right? I outlined it. I put it up on the screen. I even said there's one rule and one rule only. This is not tic-tac-toe. So I'm curious, Mika, what was your thought process as you were playing this game? Because at one point you said it's not a trick.
Okay.
What was your thought?
Sure. I couldn't help myself and make sure that to bring in the fun, but also to think of inclusion. And I want to make sure that she was able to get the 3 points as well. So I didn't block her from getting the 5 points. I'm sorry. So that's what I was thinking. Like, how many points can we both get? That's literally what I was thinking.
So your thought process was, hey, let's see how we both can get as many points as possible. I
know
love
it was
that.
a little bit against the rule, but I couldn't help myself.
No, you couldn't help yourself. I love that. And couldn't help yourself. And by the way, we see that sometimes when it comes to inclusion too, right? I just can't help myself. I know there's some guidelines. I know there's some rules. I know there's some things I should be doing, but I just can't help myself. All right. Now, Sharita, I'm curious for you, what was your thought process as you were playing through this game?
Oh, my thought process was once you get in the middle, you have more opportunity.
So in other words, from the beginning, is it possible, Sharita, that you felt like I had perhaps hampered your ability to win?
No, because it's also then how you like relook at the game, but you just know from the center, no matter where you go, you're going to have more chances at making a connection.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, I let Mika go first here. I made the choice, and in some ways perhaps hampered you. In other ways, caused you to have to look differently to the problem here. And by the way, team, we see this all the time when it comes to inclusion or any other thing that we're trying to accomplish. Any result we are looking to achieve comes with some sort of mindset. You just heard Mika and Sharita speak to this mindsets that they had, right? One was, hey, let's see if we both can get points. Another one thinking, boy, I've got to look differently at how I play this game. I'm curious, Mika and Sharita, any reason we didn't maybe play the game this way?
Too complicated?
Interesting. Too complicated. Good. Sharita, any thoughts?
I think it would be more because the board's not set up to play across like that, but there's no way we didn't do that.
So in other words, your thought process was when I gave you a hashtag up on the screen and I said, choose a partner X and an O, that the board was not set up to play this way. Is that fair?
And also you put the first marking and you put it in the middle based on what she said.
So it's my fault.
Not your fault. She said put it in the middle. So it
totally
wasn't like Mika said, oh, put a small X at the top of the box, you know, so.
I love this. So group, here's the challenge. It doesn't take much to trigger a certain way of thinking in us. And so the reason we played the game was to illustrate our first powerful model. And this is a model you can use anywhere when it comes to the idea of inclusion. And the chat panel is starting to light up a little bit. Megan said, I couldn't see anything but how you would play tic-tac-toe, despite the fact that I had the big rule in red letters that said, hey, this is not tic-tac-toe, right? There it was. This is not tic-tac-toe. We still played some version of tic-tac-toe instead of thinking differently about it. And this is the challenge that comes with us when we start to talk about inclusion as well. Now, we do this again to illustrate a very simple model for you. We call this the results pyramid. This has been used by people all over the globe in helping to fundamentally understand why people do the things they do. And it hopefully will help each of you as you think about how do we create this culture of inclusion, begin to understand not only why people are showing up in the way they are right now, but how do we fundamentally begin to shift the mindset so that we get to a desired result. Much like in this game, there was a result we were looking to achieve. When it comes to inclusion, there are results we are looking to achieve, right? The same in this game, we were looking to win. So now to play this game, Mika or Sharita, to score points in this game, what did you physically have to do to score points? and they may be back on mute.
To,
Go ahead, Mika.
think strategically and think ahead.
So you had to think strategically. I love that, Mika. So you were thinking ahead, you were looking forward, you applied some strategic thinking, and ultimately you had to decide where you wanted to put your X or O. So the action you had taken determined the result you achieved. Whether you did all top row, middle, bottom, whatever it was, the actions you had taken determined the results you did or did not achieve. And by the way, this is true for anything in any of our lives. The actions we take will always determine the results we do or do not achieve. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. We go and we say we need inclusion. And by the way, this is what it should look like. And people all over the globe have a different set of beliefs about this idea of inclusion. For example, if I'm a general ed teacher, I may have a different view of inclusion than I would if I was somebody who spent my entire day in this space, right? And dealing with the everyday problems and challenges that come with this topic. And so, group, the beliefs we hold will always influence the actions we take. You saw this play out in our tic-tac-toe game. You saw the grid, an X and an O, despite the fact that the rules said this is not tic-tac-toe, the beliefs that were being held drove certain types of actions. In Mika's case, hey, I want to make sure I'm inclusive here and we're both going to get some points. So I'll even say to you, it's not a trick. It's not a trick. Yet, Sharita, you still played the game based on the beliefs that you were holding, right? Based on a strategy or the beliefs you hold. Now, we all have beliefs about winning or losing or what it looks like to get results. And those come from our life experiences. The experiences we have as children, the experiences we have in the classroom, the experiences we have when we wanted to do something and it didn't land in the way we had hoped it would. That would then suggest, well, that's never going to work. We can go back to the chat panel. We can actually go back and talk about some of the things that came up earlier. Preconceived notions, right? Talk about beliefs, right, in the chat panel. As we go back to some of the earlier conversations, one size does not fit all, Hillary mentioned. So in other words, if my belief is what's happening over there isn't going to work for me, could you see where I would maybe have some element of pushback for the efforts that you're trying to accomplish? Now, here's the other reality of this pyramid group. This pyramid starts to illustrate a couple of really other interesting things about human behavior that you could expect would happen. Now, just in the chat panel, if we're not getting a desired result in something, personally, professionally, whatever it is, if we're not getting a desired result, which level of this pyramid do you think we generally go to try to change the results? We're not getting a desired result. Which level do you think we start to focus on to try to change those results? Yeah, you can see the chat panel light up here. Actions, 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 actions. We tend to build new action plans. I want you to think for just a moment, just pause and ponder for just a moment. How many different new plans have you put in place relative to inclusion? How many times when something is not being achieved in the way you wanted it to, that you came back and said, you know what, here's what we now need to do. And you came up with a new action plan. Think about the number of meetings that you have every single day to come up with new actions to try to get people to show up differently, right? Yeah, Megan says all the meetings. And Megan, I'm with you on that. It's meeting after meeting after meeting. It's constant. And so as we start to think through this a little bit, group, effectively what happens is most of us, when we're not getting a desired result, we tend to split this pyramid in half. We work a pyramid that's 2 levels deep. But in fact, what's happening here is we don't actually have an action problem. What we have is a belief problem. In other words, despite us saying this is not tic-tac-toe, people will show up playing tic-tac-toe. So as we start to think about this, the culture of inclusion could simply be encapsulated this way. It's the experiences, the beliefs, and the actions that are happening. That culture is driving the results. The results we are achieving today are based on the way people are showing up thinking based on their own individual experiences, and then ultimately the actions they're taking because of that thinking. So the pyramid would suggest that if in fact what we want to do is get a new result, can we just throw that new result right on top of our current way of thinking and acting? That absolutely not. So obviously Einstein's definition of insanity, if we want a new result, R2, the new result, different than today's, it would require a different type of thinking and ultimately actions. And so as we see this start to play out again in the chat panel, some great comments. The problem is, how do you change experiences? Well, good news, Karen. That's what we're going to spend some time talking about here today. Because the natural tendency for us is to go to action plans. And to the point that Ruby makes, it can feel very limiting in terms of what I can change. Because ultimately, why do we spend most of our time at the action layer? We spend most of our time at the action layer because it feels very, very daunting and overwhelming to think, well, how many different beliefs would I have to go change? Or how many thousands of different experiences do I need to now create if I'm going to shift these beliefs? So the pyramid gives us a simple model or definition of culture and a simple way to understand why people are doing the things they are doing. Now think about this for just a minute, just on a very personal basis, group. Forget about the topic of inclusion for just a minute, but this pyramid's at play everywhere. It's at play in our personal lives, in our professional lives. It's at play in everything we do. Early this morning, one of my teenagers, I happen to have 5 children, 2 of them who are high school age right now, the other 3 out of the house. One of my teenagers came to me and said, well, Dad, you just don't get it. I need to talk to Mom because she's the only one who understands me. Now, group, in that moment, my 15-year-old just expressed a belief. Now, I could go to this spot of, is that belief right or wrong? But quite frankly, it's right to her, team. Based on the experiences she has had, whether it's things I have done, whether it's things her mother's done, whether it's a combination of those, the experiences have driven her to a belief that says, I don't understand my 15-year-old. And the reality is I don't. She's 15. I'm constantly perplexed. But team, as we think through this a little bit, please understand the fact that we are constantly bumping up against this idea of existing beliefs. We spend time at this action layer because it is so much easier than being able to go after this idea of beliefs. In other words, I'm going to tell you this is what I'm thinking. I'm going to tell you this is the way I need you to show up. We spend a lot of time, by the way, as parents at the top 2 levels of this pyramid. Go and do because I told you to do. Now, is it possible that we may have some of that mindset when it comes to inclusion as well? So here's the biggest challenge, group, is the first thing that has to happen before we even create a new group of experiences is we have to suspend this bias that all of the people around us have relative to this topic. And I'll just illustrate this in a very, very simple way. We call this at Culture Partners, we call this belief bias. Psychologists talk about it as confirmation bias, etc. But we all have a bias. a way we view the world through our own groups of experiences. And that bias influences the actions that we take, whether or not we choose to allow people into our circle of friends, whether or not we choose to work with general ed teachers in a way because we don't think they get it. Whatever that bias is, it's impacting the way we show up, and ultimately then either helping propel us forward or perhaps anchoring us to the past. So you've all heard this before, but obviously, if we're going to change the beliefs that people hold, the best predictor of future behavior is always past behavior. In other words, the results you're getting today are because of the way people are thinking and acting, and you can expect to get those same exact results unless you fundamentally shift that bias and get them to open their mindset to a new way of thinking. So again, this idea of bias is this propensity that we all have to validate the beliefs we have as being true. And I want to illustrate this to set up how you can begin to suspend this bias when it comes to inclusion. All right, I'm going to illustrate this with a very, very simple story. I have a sister-in-law who, by the way, I love dearly. She's incredible. She'd do anything for anyone. She has one small character flaw, team. She's chronically late to everything. You may know this person in your life or whatever, but my sister-in-law, boy, she is forever been late to everything. I've been married 27 years. And by the way, she was the maid of honor at my wedding 27 years ago. And she was 2.5 hours late to my wedding. Now, group, do you think I'm holding some beliefs about her? And how long do you think I have been holding on to that set of beliefs? 27 years worth of believing she will be late to everything. As a matter of fact, it is the family joke, right? Some of you may be able to relate to this. I see some of you in the chat panel connecting with this, but it's the family joke. Everybody's looking at it going, yep, absolutely. As a matter of fact, when we go on family vacations together, sometimes people will get together and even they'll play some wagers. Hey, I bet you she won't be here until Monday or Tuesday. I bet you she won't be here until next week. It is constant. And there's this deeply rooted belief about her. So let's just hypothetically take this story and go one step further. Let's just say the first of this year, she decided she wanted to turn over a new leaf. All right. And Shiraz, maybe we can get somebody who would be willing to just take themselves off a mute for just a moment here. Maybe we can just kind of pick somebody for us here to take off a mute. Just because I want to have a voice here to voice some of this. Maybe somebody raise your hand if you're just willing to play along with me here a little as I complete this story. Okay.
I just allowed talking to one of the participants. Mikey?
Hi, yes, Mika.
Mika.
Mika, go ahead. Yep. Perfect. So Mika, thanks for taking yourself off of mute again, Mika. So love this. So here's what we're going to do, Mika, on this. I just need you to kind of answer very truthfully some questions for me. My sister-in-law, chronically late to everything. Hypothetically, she decides she's going to turn over a new leaf. And so January 1st, she shows up at our family function on time, right when the family, New Year's Day party is supposed to start. There she is at the door. We open the door and she's standing there. Mika, what do you say to her when she's standing there, knowing she's the chronically late person? And there she is on time.
You're on time.
Yeah, but you hear a group, you're on time. Whoa, what's that about, right? We may even be laughing and joking around about it. All right. And so what's so powerful in this, Mika, is you are now having this moment where you're like, whoa, this is not real. There's something not right about this. So we kind of discount that and go, she showed up on time. The very next week, she shows up on time again, Mika, to whatever, a family birthday party or something. She shows up on time again. And now as you open the door, there she is. She's on time. This is the second time in a row. What do you say this time? Is she standing there at the door, do you think, Mika?
Hey, I'm so glad you're on time.
I'm glad you're on time. And then, by the way, what's the conversation you're having with everybody else in the kitchen kind of behind her back, do you think, Mika?
I wonder what she's doing differently, and I wonder how long it's going to last.
Yeah, there it is, Mika. I wonder how long this is going to last, right? You may even be having a conversation with somebody saying, hey, I'll bet you, $20. This doesn't last for another week. I don't know what she's doing different, but boy, I wonder how long this is gonna last, right? Nicole says, hey, thanks for coming. I am glad you're here. And I love this group, but human nature starts to get us to this spot where we're starting to look for evidence that this isn't going to last, to Mika's point. So 3 weeks later, she shows up on time again. Great. We've had these great experiences with her. She's been on time. She's been on time. And then let's say 30 days into it, she gets a flat tire out on the highway. She picks up the phone and she calls and she says, I'm so sorry, I've gotten a flat tire. I'll be there as soon as I can. When we hang up the phone, Mika, what do you think we say to everyone else in the room?
I wonder
At
if
that
she
point?
really has a flat tire.
Yeah, do you hear it, group? I wonder if she really has a flat tire. This sounds like another one of the excuses. I told you she'd be back to her old tricks. You can write whatever narrative you want. But in other words, my bias was looking for her to fail. So welcome to the big challenge you have when it comes to creating this culture of inclusion. There are these biases everywhere. They're looking for certain propensities for things to be true based on the beliefs that people are holding. So if you want to shift those biases, it becomes imperative that you apply a very simple methodology for how you will shift that belief. And I'm gonna break this down for you in two simple ways here, group. I'll just use my sister-in-law story, and Mika, stay with me here on this to illustrate this. And here's the process. And I'll give you this methodology now. This is how you suspend that bias. So using my sister-in-law's example here, she comes to us and says, hey, let's say it's December 31st. I don't want to be the late gal anymore. I'm tired of you believing that I'm always late. As a matter of fact, I want you to expect something different. I want you to look for something different. As a matter of fact, the belief I want you to have is that I can be on time. And so here's what I'm going to do. Start looking for these things. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show up 5 minutes early to everything. And, I absolutely want to start to shift this belief. Now, when she says that, Mika, I'm going to show up 5 minutes to everything. What do we say to her, do you think, when she's telling the whole family this is what she's going to work on?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you hear the group? You hear the bias group? Yeah, right. I still have that bias. I'm like, yeah, not quite sure, but probably not. But you say it, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. So Mika, let's play this out. She's come to us and she said, hey, I don't want to be the late gal anymore. I'm now going to show up on time to everything. Matter of fact, I'm going to be 5 minutes early. So the very next day, January 1st, there she is at the door, 5 minutes before our gathering's supposed to start. I open the door. What do I say to her?
Congratulations. You're
Hey.
5 minutes early.
Congratulations, you're 5 minutes early. And Mika, you hear what's happening here, and team? Mika now is recognizing the fact that she's making progress. She's not looking for the misstep. She's starting to recognize the movement in the right direction. So a week later, 2 weeks into it, she shows up again on time. And this time, as she shows up on time again, there she is 5 minutes early, knock at the door. What do we say to her when she shows up 5 minutes early this time, Mika. Second time in a row. What do we say now?
Wow, you did it again. Awesome.
Hey, awesome. Great job. So you hear what's happening? Her bias now is not looking for the misstep or the fall, but it's starting to look for the forward progress. So 3 weeks later, she pops in the door again, 5 minutes early for whatever the function is. And this time she comes to us, and as she's coming in the door, she says, you know, hey, I've been creating these experiences for you. I've been 5 minutes early. How's this working? And Mika, what do we say to her when she asks us that question? How's this working?
It's working great.
It's working great. And she says, great. Is there anything else you need to see or I need to do? And our response is what, Mika?
No, this is great.
This is great. And if you're like me, Mika, you'd probably even say, yeah, you know what? This is awesome. But by the way, can you bring dessert the next time you come to the family function? Right? So we always have a few other things we want, but we're okay with the progress we're making. So then here we go to that fateful 30 days later. She gets the flat tire out on the highway. She picks up the phone and she calls and she says, I'm so sorry. I've gotten a flat tire on the highway. And as a matter of fact, I'm not going to be there right when I told you I would be. Certainly not going to be 5 minutes early. I'm so sorry. I've asked my daughter to pick up the dessert and bring it over to the function. She'll be there early. I will get there as soon as I can. And Mika, before you hang up the phone, what do you say to her?
Totally get it. Be safe. Don't worry about being late.
Yeah. So group, do you hear the shift here? Instead of she's back, it's, hey, be careful. Don't worry about it. What has fundamentally shifted in this equation was that before creating these early experiences for us, she intentionally set about shifting our way of thinking. In other words, she suspended our current way of thinking to make sure that we were looking for evidence of the change and not evidence of the misstep or that bias getting in our way. So there was a question, Christina asked in the chat panel here, can I re-explain creating these early experiences? Yeah, early experiences can be something as simple as showing up on time. When it comes to inclusion, it could be something about the way we're communicating with our general education teachers in terms of involvement in, student involvement in things, et cetera. The experiences at some level, Christina, are simply actions. But the difference between an action and an experience is how I interpret the action. In other words, my sister-in-law shows up late. That's an action. But the experience it creates for me is one that she can't get anywhere on time. So when we start to dissect this a little bit further on the pyramid, what we start to understand is the thing we get to control when it comes to inclusion or any other belief or mindset is how do we create the right experience that's going to shift the belief. But the challenge is, team, if we do not look at this through the lens of the fact that people are holding a belief, in fact, the problem that comes in is we start to then instead just take a series of actions to try to drive a different result, instead of getting really, really intentional about shifting the belief and suspending that bias. All right. And Christina, if that didn't answer the question appropriately for you, please chime in on the chat panel as well. So let me give you this methodology again, group, just in a broader format with some language here, and then we can break it down even further. And I'll build it out for us completely here, given the time we have. So in this methodology for changing beliefs or suspending this bias, it starts with step number one. Identify the belief you need to change. So group, when you think about the belief that needs to be changed when it comes to inclusion, just in the chat panel for me, what's one or two mindsets or beliefs that need to change? Just throw them in the chat panel, right? And Megan, I think this is going to get to the heart of your question here in terms of how do we create these early experiences if you're not in the classroom every day. By the way, do you hear that belief, Megan, that says, boy, I maybe can't shift a belief because I'm not in the classroom with you every single day. Do you hear how that's a bias that we may be holding when it comes to inclusion? And so you're starting to see them show up in the chat panel. Inclusion is about supporting all children. So that's a great belief. People have low expectations. We can't teach these kids. They don't, or they do have an ability. I'm not trained to work with those students. So let's just take that one, just because it's the last one I read. I'm not trained to work with those students. So if someone shows up in your world and says, you know what, I'm not trained to work with those students. If that's the belief, what actions would you likely see them take here, team? Think about it. If my belief is I'm not trained to work with those students, I don't know how, I don't have the ability, those students, they give up, they complain, resistance to change, they want more, perhaps they push back to team members, they'll not even try. You're seeing it blow up here in the chat panel group. This is the crux of your problem. We're throwing action layer solutions at belief layer problems. So if the belief is I'm not trained to support or work with those students, you have a belief problem. And the first step is you've got to begin to very intentionally apply this methodology. So using that example, that's not a belief I want you to have. I don't want you to hold a belief that you have to have years and years worth of training to be able to work with these students. In fact, the belief I want you to hold is you have all kinds of skills to be able to work with any student and create meaningful difference. So here's what we are going to do. You see how I'm very intentionally now stepping through the process. And as we see again on the chat panel here, at the far end of the spectrum, people will actually sabotage your efforts if their beliefs and that bias is strong enough against what it is you're trying to accomplish. And so if that's the case, the only choice you have is you've got to become really intentional about shifting that bias or suspending that mindset so you can begin to take the next steps here. Once we've suspended that, a la my sister-in-law's story, we can then begin to create the experiences. If she didn't suspend that bias, I'm always looking for her to fail. Once she suspended that bias and said, here's what to look for, here's the belief I want you to hold, I started looking for evidence of the change. Terrible analogy here, group, but for those of you who are parents or aunts, uncles, whatever it is, when a child's first learning how to walk and they take that first step and they fall down, what do we say to them? Do we say, you loser, that's the best you got? No, instead what we say is, great job. Do it again, right? Come on, you got this. In other words, we start to reinforce the behavior that we want to see. We water what we want to see grow. But unless you can suspend that bias so people are looking for something, you can't reinforce the behavior. Because you reinforce the behavior with someone and their bias instantly says, you know what, you're just telling me this because no one else is listening to you, or no one else is involved in the program the way you want them to be, so you're placating me. You see how these biases start to filter into everything. So as we work our way through here, group, on the chat panel, there's some other things coming up here as well. But you'll notice the last couple of steps on this, step 4 and 5. Is that going to be enough, or is there something else you need to see from me? If you're not asking the question here of the teams and the individuals that you are working with, the families, the students, the teachers that you're involved with when it comes to inclusion, if you're not asking, here's the belief I want you to hold, here's what we're going to do about it, is that going to be enough, or is there something else you need to see? You're applying a guessing game strategy. You're applying a hope strategy. So we'd encourage you on step 4 of this to be very intentional in the ask. Hey, is that going to be enough, or do you need to see something else? You may actually hear somebody say to you, you know what? Actually, I don't need you to do all those things you just spent the last 3 months in meetings talking about. What I really could use is, and then they outline the 1 or 2 simple things they need to see from you. Now we're creating movement in the right direction, right? We're reinforcing the step. And then finally, step 5 on this group, and you heard this in my sister-in-law example, along the way, you have to be checking in and giving or seeking feedback. Hey, you'd mentioned this was important to you when it comes to, bringing students into your classroom. How's this working? What else do you need? Where else are there roles we can play? Are we moving the needle in the right direction? So Kimberly, there's a question here in the Q&A area. It says, what if creating successful experiences takes time? For example, it takes time for students to get adjusted to general education settings. Do we give a rough timeline, like give it a few weeks to see progress? Kimberly, I know you're going to hate this answer, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. And it's this. What's the belief you need that individual to hold? If you're talking to me as a general education teacher, and in my conversations with you, I'm saying to you, you know what? It's not happening fast enough. Spring break's going to be upon us as soon as I know it. I just don't see how this is possible. Well, part of interpreting these early experiences is to then understand the fact that I just expressed a belief to you. There's not going to be enough time. We're not going to get there quick enough. Well, okay, the belief I need you to hold is this is not a function of time. This is going to be a pursuit for us longer term. To give you some guidelines, here's a rough timeline to your statement here, Kimberly, right? So I love this, because what starts to happen is when we start to think at the bottom level of the pyramid here, we start to realize just how frequently people are expressing these different beliefs that are inhibiting our ability to get to this inclusive culture that we want. Now, team, here's what I will say as our time starts to wind down. You cannot do this for everything. I'd love to say you could do this for everything, but you have to pick your spots here. What are the most critical beliefs that you need to shift? Because if it were across multiple different sites or locations, and there's something that's occurring at 5 or 6 of these, and that's a prevailing belief, that would be the time we would suggest you apply this process. Now, you may also apply it in the one-to-one individual personal kind of interactions that I have with a teacher or an administrator or someone else. Works perfectly in that environment too. But please understand the fact that you've got to be looking at this through the bottom level of the pyramid. What are the beliefs I need someone to hold? What are the beliefs they are currently holding? And then how can I become really intentional about suspending that bias? So I want to look here. There's some things coming up on the chat panel as well. Amy says supporting teachers in the classroom with hands-on coaching has been successful in changing their beliefs. Once they build confidence in what they're doing, they will be more successful and open to inclusion. And so, Amy, what I love about that, as I come back to this, the same thing here, in other words, if I have an experience with you with hands-on coaching that you've given to me, that experience maybe shifts my belief. It says, boy, I can do this, and this is good. I've got a confidence. I've got a belief now that would suggest I can be successful in this, which means if the belief is right, it's working for us, that naturally drives the right actions. So the pyramid can work on the positive as well, right? If my belief is, boy, I'm getting a ton of support and a ton of coaching, you can see how that would then start to drive the right actions. Here's what I would say to that, Amy and others here on this. Do not leave those experiences you're creating up to interpretation. And by that, here's what I mean. Amy, as you go in and you're working to do some coaching, in the classroom, make sure you're interpreting for that individual or department or teams or whatever administrator. The reason we are here today and I'm giving you additional coaching is because I want you to believe, fill in the blank. This is possible. You can do this. This is not going to take as much time. Do you hear how the interpretation ensures the fact that the experience is landing the right way? Because the other option is to do what my sister-in-law did, just start showing up on time. And if I show up on time without interpreting the experiences, people's biases will always filter out evidence that the change is happening. So we have to become really intentional right now of interpreting the experiences. So group, as we finish out here today, first of all, thank you for your participation and time. I hope that this was valuable for you in starting to challenge the mindset a little bit of where we're going on this. There will be some other opportunities that I'll be working, with some of this community moving forward. I appreciate, first of all, everything each of you do every day. The world's a much better place because all of you are in it. You wouldn't be here today if you didn't have a very real passion and concern for this topic. And I hope that something you've taken away from today will challenge your mindset a little bit and make you a little bit better as you continue down this important path. So with that, Kevin, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you so much. I wish we had hours and hours more. It's so great to be with all of you.
Oh, but Vince, we will have hours and hours and more. We are contracting with you and Culture Partners for a 4-session series starting June 6th. I put the link in the chat for anyone who wants to register. It is at no cost to explore this topic. And the work that we do in SIP in working with our LEAs, this is the foundational component of creating meaningful, inclusive environments and changing those mindsets. So we appreciate your attendance and all of the information you provided, Vince. We appreciate your allyship to our students with disabilities and their families, for it is our mission to redesign our educational system to innovate, include, and impact outcomes positively for all students. So everyone, be sure to join us at 11 o'clock for another inclusion, or 11 o'clock for another inclusion infusion with DJ B. Diamond before our second round of breakouts at 11:10. Also, remember to connect in the social lounge with like-minded attendees and post on social media using the hashtag SIPCon2022. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, all. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Great job, Vince.
Thanks. I hope that landed in the way you'd hoped it would, Kevin.
Oh, it did. Look at the chat.
I'm scrolling through, so a lot of people asking about the link. So
yeah, I just posted it again.
It's great. Well, what a wonderful thing. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we're looking forward to June.
It's such a joy for me to be able to do this. As I told you before, it's a different thing to do it for people that every day are trying to really dramatically change lives versus this idea of doing it for somebody who's trying to make another dollar.
Yeah, this is the hard work right here.
Yep, it is. And
Good work.
great dedicated people. Congratulations to you and Kristen as well, for the obvious success that this this conference and series is having. So I love this one. Boy, I wish I could reach out to some of these people. This was the single most important PD I've had in a while. So
well, great stuff. Great comments.
so, all right. Well,
Thanks
I'll look
for
forward to
participating.
feedback from you, Kevin, as we plan for the next sessions, and super excited about what these are going to look like as we move forward. And as you hear from anyone, feedback in any way, shape, or form, love to have that so we can adjust to make sure the next sequence is what it needs to be. Okay.
Awesome. We'll connect soon, Vince. Thank you so
Very,
much.
very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Bye-bye.